KNIX Radio is one of dozens of local media companies sold within the past year. Radio, TV, and now the Valley's top newspapers are changing hands. What's behind the consolidation of local media? And what does it mean to you and me? Find out Wednesday at 7 on Horizon.
They were called indestructible, yet each perished into the dark seas. Now, the team that discovered the Titanic plunges deep into the unknown to explore the fallen vessels that lie along the ocean floor.
So many people's dreams ended here.
These are the stories of their demise and the dreams they took with them. Lost Liners.
Wednesday night at 9 on Channel 8.
Four writers shed their fears on a voyage of self-discovery.
Take me to the river, dip me in the water.
New from Channel 8's Arizona collection.
Welcome to the future. PBS Digital. It looks immovable, but once it moved a mile in a day. You can watch it from a lounge or ride it in a barrel. It looks untamed, but we control it like a spigot. What on earth is going on here? Mother Nature meets her match, and you can see how it ends right now on Niagra Falls, a Naked Planet special. This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
There is a place where every second, over 500,000 gallons of water tumbles over towering cliffs 3,000 feet wide. A place where it free falls a spectacular 170 feet before plunging into a seething cauldron far below. These thundering waters reflect nature at its most powerful and destructive, and its most magical and alluring. This is Niagara Falls. As one of the world's natural wonders, our love affair with Niagara has spanned the past 300 years. Once the fall's foaming waters were feared and revered. Today, they have been tamed, and we experience them from as many vantage points as we can. Yet some are ready to risk death to experience these waters in all their raw power. They have been tamed, and we experience them from as many vantage points as we can. Yet some are ready to risk death to experience these waters in all their raw power. The falls have long excited powerful emotions and eccentric behavior. But Niagara also excited scientific curiosity. It puzzled geologists, and 100 years ago was at the center of a technological revolution that powered the growth of America's industrial might.
Niagara Falls was on the cutting edge of technology. It drew the world's most prominent scientists and inventors and industrialists. And Niagara Falls can really be likened to being a Silicon Valley of the 1890s. It was that essential.
Niagara Falls itself is very powerful. For me, it gives me a lot of strength. And I think the water is my protection.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's awesome, and it's fierce, and it's large. It's just beautiful. I think everybody should see this.
As people have been seduced by Niagara Falls, they have in turn changed them. So could it be that in our 300-year-long affair with Niagara, we're guilty of loving it to death? Sparked by his own deeply personal encounter, author Patrick McGreevy has been studying the history of our relationship with the falls for 20 years.
I grew up about 20 miles from the falls, but I never thought of them as extraordinary. Until one night I was working the night shift at a factory on the American shore, and during my lunch break at 4 a.m. I went for a ride and decided to go see the falls. And I parked and walked toward the falls, and it was very dark. I couldn't see anything until I began to get closer, but I could hear this tremendous roar of the water. And as I got closer, I could finally begin to glimpse sort of this black seething mass crossing over the edge of the precipice. And it was an incredibly stunning sight for me. Then I saw a light behind me. As a policeman, he thought I was going to take my life. That moment made me realize that the falls could be a very gripping place, an extraordinary place indeed.
This extraordinary place seems to affect the way people behave. It's a stage to which people are drawn to mark important events.
Brian, will you have Paula to be your wife, and will you in all love and honor?
200 years ago, a tradition was born at Niagara that continues to this day, honeymooning at the falls.
According to the ordinance of God and holy marriage.
I will.
Brian, you may kiss your bride.
In 1801, the daughter of Vice President Aaron Burr traveled from Albany, New York to Niagara to celebrate her honeymoon. The allure was so powerful they were prepared to travel 5 days with 9 pack horses and a train of servants to reach the falls. Today, the falls are a fast getaway for 50,000 honeymooners every year, and they're infamous for affairs and elopements, all due, of course, to the magic of the water.
Well, honeymooners come here, I'm sure, because of our negative ions. Those are good guys. Negative ions are created by falling water, and that falling water makes you feel good. So you feel good for 3 or 4 hours, so people come here on their honey lunacy, on their honeymoon, because of these sexy negative ions.
But for some, Niagara's waters have a darker power. People have connected its white foaming abyss with the gateway between life and death. The ever-present rainbow's also seen as a link between heaven and earth. Patrick McGreevy believes that Niagara arouses people's sense of the infinite.
Niagara has stirred religious feelings in people for centuries. Some very traditional people, for instance, like Archbishop Lynch of Toronto, who proposed of their last moment on earth, of their leap into eternity. And to him, this was a place that would evoke this feeling.
In 1861, the Pope did in fact consecrate Niagara Falls as an official pilgrim shrine. But there's a darker side to this religious aspect of the falls. Every 2 weeks, at least one person commits suicide here, and suicide is enshrined in the myths surrounding the falls. The most famous legend associated with Niagara is about suicide. It tells of a beautiful Indian maiden named Lelawala. The story goes that she was forced to marry a brave she despised. Rather than do this, she paddled her canoe over the brink of the falls, sacrificing herself to the thunder god. Today, this Indian legend has lent its name to Niagara's most famous attraction, the Maid of the Mist. Almost as famous as the falls themselves, the Maid of the Mist boats have been taking tourists right up close to the raging torrent of the Horseshoe Falls since 1846. But local Native Americans feel that this story misrepresents their history. It was embellished by white men keen to romanticize the falls and attract visitors. They are currently campaigning to force the boats to change their name.
It was just something that had happened long ago, where a girl had gone over the falls in a canoe, and then along the years they said it was an Indian maiden, and that, you know, she was sacrificed so that, you know, life would carry on, but that was never ever, you know. And matter of fact, we're trying to work on changing the name of the boats, the Maid of the Mist, because of that legend itself, because how untrue it really is.
But for the 1 million passengers a year, this wet and windy boat trip is the best way to experience Niagara's violent nature close up. Captain Jerry Fletcher has been at the helm for the past 35 years. In his time, he has seen bodies tumble over the falls, and he also senses something in the allure of Niagara's cascading waters that draws people to dice with death.
Sure enough, there is an attraction there that makes you sort of lean towards the falls a bit. I don't think it's not that drastic that you'd ever jump or anything like that, but there is that tendency to sort of lean towards the falls.
The first people to live within the sound of its falling waters were Native Americans thousands of years ago. Although the falls were unpassable by canoe and so avoided by them, they were seen as a highly spiritual place and home to the thunder god.
The word Niagara is an old Indian word. It comes from the Neutral tribe, and it literally means, in their Indian language, when they were around, thundering waters. It's a very powerful word for a very powerful subject, Niagara.
But the origins of the falls goes further back than this, all the way to the last ice age. 100,000 years ago, huge ice sheets 2 miles thick completely covered much of North America. When the weather turned warmer 18,000 years ago, the glaciers began their slow retreat, leaving behind vast ponds of melted water. Today, these ponds form the largest body of fresh water in the world, the Great Lakes. 1/5 of all the world's fresh water is cradled within Lake Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Lake Ontario. En route to the Atlantic Ocean, this immense volume of liquid drains through each of the Great Lakes in turn. Connecting the last two, Erie and Ontario, is the 35-mile-long Niagara River. Flowing northwards, it carries the entire content of 4 lakes. In terms of volume of water carried per mile, this is the largest river on the planet. After 22 miles, this massive volume of water plunges over Niagara Falls. Today, the river marks the border between Canada and the United States. On one side of the border, the water pours over the dramatic curve of the Canadian Horseshoe Falls, and on the other, it tumbles over the small Bridal Veil Falls. Is called Goat Island. The first white man to witness this scene was a Belgian priest named Father Louis Hennepin. He was part of an ambitious French expedition to venture westwards into the unexplored interior. The goal was to chart territory and save souls. He even carried a portable altar on his back for the purpose. In December 1678, the expedition first heard the great roar of the falls. Unused to the power of nature on such a scale, Hennepin wrote of his encounter with the mighty cataract, "The waters which fall from this horrible precipice do foam and boil, making an outrageous noise more terrible than that of thunder." His description of Niagara, published 5 years after his visit, became the basis for the first picture of the falls. Hennepin could not behold the falls without a shudder. They excited powerful emotions. It said he fell to his knees, thinking the sound of its waters were divine thunder. He wrote, "I could not conceive how it came to pass that the 4 great lakes should empty themselves at this great fall, and yet not drown a good part of America." Ever since Hennepin, people have come to witness the spectacle of the falls. But in 1859, thousands flocked to Niagara for a different reason. The cataracts were to be the backdrop for a death-defying stunt. Suspended across the gorge, 200 feet high, was a 2-inch rope. 35-year-old Jean-Francois Gravelet, also known as the Great Blondin, became the first person to tightrope walk between Canada and the United States. In the coming years, he would walk the line many times and become known as the Conqueror of Niagara. He did the stunt pushing a wheelbarrow, on a bicycle, and with his arms and legs in manacles. On another occasion, he pushed a cook stove to the center of the rope, prepared a meal, and lowered it to the passengers on the Maid of the Mist. Although many other tightrope walkers would perform across the gorge for years to come, this circus act would soon be replaced by an even more dangerous stunt, not performed by a man, but by a 63-year-old woman. It all started October 24th, 1901. Annie Taylor, a former dancer, strapped herself into a wooden barrel and became the first person to deliberately go over the mighty falls. Since then, more than 15 other daredevils have done the same. 5 have died. In 1930, George Stathakis died in this barrel. But it wasn't the impact that killed him. After going over the falls, his barrel became trapped in the powerful undercurrent below. Caught in its violent waters for 18 hours, he only had enough oxygen for 3 hours. But in 1983, local guide Dave Mundy set out to tame the falls for himself. Costing $16,000, his barrel was 7 feet long and 4 feet in diameter. Weighing in at 1,000 pounds, this steel drum was lined with aluminum and sandwiched with foam. On an overcast October morning, Dave Mundy's silver barrel was pushed over the rails and tumbled down the bank into the icy Niagara River. As it was carried towards the brink, his onboard camera recorded what could be Dave's final moments. The worry for everyone was whether his barrel would be safely thrown clear or get caught under.
Barrel's up! As the barrel was falling, I was counting because I want to know the true speed of it. And I counted to 3.5 seconds exactly because I've done lots of skydiving. I've got 1,400 parachute jumps. And I know what falling is all about. And to fall from the top to the bottom is 3.5 seconds exact. Not 4 seconds, but 3.5 seconds, which works out to be about 85 miles per hour when you hit the bottom.
Although dangerous, not to mention illegal, Dave Mundy doesn't see his stunt as in any way suicidal.
People say I'm trying to commit suicide all the time. If I want to commit suicide, I wouldn't. Why would you do something that you got a half a chance to live? If you want to commit suicide, take a gun and put it to your head and pull the trigger. That's committing suicide. You go to Niagara Falls, you've got a good chance of living. You want to commit suicide, you don't want to live anymore. I want to keep living.
It seems we all want to get close to the falls somehow. And other, more ingenious and far less dangerous ways of experiencing them have been created. Each year at the Cave of the Winds below the American Falls, a wooden walkway is built so that visitors can get right up close. This ingenious construction is not fixed in any way to the rock. If the water were to suddenly change course, it would be swept away. Down under the roaring falls, Father Louis Hennepin described the noise as so loud it would cause deafness. He was apt to exaggerate, saying the falls were 400 feet higher than they really are. He also said it was possible to drive 4 coaches abreast into the space behind the falls. Another falsehood. But not one that has prevented people trying to get behind them. 125 feet below the Horseshoe Falls is a labyrinth of tunnels, 620 feet long, that take tourists right behind it. Here, the sheer power of the water is thrillingly obvious. Hidden within the veil of white water, incredibly violent forces are tearing at the cliff day after day. These forces have created Niagara, but revealing exactly how they did so means a journey downstream, away from the falls, and back in time 12,600 years. As the Niagara River continually pours over the falls, the water has a devastating impact on the rocks over which it flows. 25 years ago, British scientist Keith Tinkler was lured halfway around the world to investigate what was happening behind Niagara's curtain of deadly water.
The falls are eroding in 3 different ways. One, because of the force of the water jet, which is plunging into the pool, recirculating, working the rocks around and drilling the bottom. Then in the middle of the waterfall, you can see it's keeping the rock wall wet, and that's weathering the rock and undermining the upper part, where the water pulls out blocks down into the plunge pool.
The impact of this can be seen by taking the water away. At the top is a layer of hard rock called dolostone, and under it is the much softer rock called Queenstown Shale. Through time, the softer shale becomes so badly eroded by water that the dolostone above is left unsupported and crashes into the water below. However, what happens in the plunge pool at the bottom of the falls is still a matter of debate. Some believe that under the water there is a sloping bank of fallen rock. Others think the water continues to plunge straight down for another 180 feet, scouring out even more rock. As the water in the plunge pool is forever. But we do know that because of these forces, the falls are constantly on the move. 300 years ago, when Hennepin first set eyes on the falls, they were almost a quarter of a mile downriver from their present position. But the falls have moved a lot further than that. Actually, they have traveled 7 miles from the position where they first started, and they've made this journey in a mere 12,600 years, an instant in geological terms. For geologists to understand exactly what happened means traveling downstream of its present position to find clues the falls left behind along its 7-mile route. Below the falls, the river roars along at the bottom of a deep gorge. Its walls are 300 feet high, but the sheer cliffs expose rocks 450 million years old. Rocks of this immense age were thought to be impossible when the gorge became the focus of early scientific scrutiny in the 19th century. Rejecting ancient origins, some thought the gorge had been caused by an earthquake. Until in 1841, Charles Lyell, the father of modern geology, came from England to Niagara with radical ideas. Lyell believed that the Earth was very ancient, and his ideas influenced Darwin's theory of evolution. He became convinced that the gorge was carved out long ago by the falls as they eroded back from some point further downstream, leaving behind the gorge through which all the water now pours. Three miles below the falls, the river runs wild as it careers downwards towards Lake Ontario, 180 feet lower. Here, the 250,000 square miles of water flowing from the Great Lakes squeezes into a channel only 1/4 mile wide. Most rapids are created by water flowing over piles of underwater rock, but not here. Here, the sheer volume of water flowing in the narrow channel is enough to create waves 25 feet high. This powerful force also flushes away any rocks or debris, digging out the bottom of the river 40 feet deep. The result is Class 6 rapids, among the most dangerous in the world. But like the daredevils at the falls, they are an irresistible fascination to canoeist John Kinney.
Not only is it moving fast, but it's pushing current down. And so regardless of how many life jackets you might have on, you could still get pushed down in one of the boils that goes down quite deep. And then the boiling action that you see in the eddies here is that aerated water that boils back to the surface.
Apart from being incredibly dangerous, like going over the falls in a barrel, it's also illegal to run these rapids. Not that it stopped John Kinney.
When I went through here in a kayak, I was excited, a little nervous. I'd wanted to do it for quite some time. And the funny thing was, as I was coming down through these big waves here, I was right where I wanted to be, and I thought I was going to have a really clean run. But when I got to the wave right behind us, right there, that's the one that exploded on me unexpectedly. And I spent the next 150, 200 yards of the river upside down with my kayak doing cartwheels. But I knew that if I just hung with it long enough, I'd be able to roll back up.
John Kinney is one of only a handful of lawbreakers that have survived these rapids. But a mile further downstream, the force of the waters gets even greater as they pour into the deadly vortex of the Niagara whirlpool. The river enters the whirlpool and is spun around in a boiling mass that is drilled down into the rock 125 feet. It covers an area larger than 60 soccer pitches. In an amazing feat of engineering, witness it from high above.
Water coming toward you is coming at an estimated 35 to 37 kilometers per hour.
Since then, over 10 million people have taken the ride.
At the center of our crossing, we're approximately 150 feet above the water line.
The whirlpool is just one more draw for visitors hungry to get close, but not too close, to the deadly waters of the Niagara River.
As The Ural car is suspended on 6
As it is flung around the whirlpool, the river changes direction 90 degrees because the gorge turns like a hairpin bend on a racetrack.
7 kilometers per hour.
Charles Lyell puzzled about why the gorge does this. He investigated the rocks around the whirlpool and found that at this point the falls hit softer sand and silt with dramatic results. Cutting upstream, when the erosive power of the falls hit the softer earth, it took the line of least resistance and followed the direction of the weaker sediments, tearing them away and creating a new section of the gorge almost instantly.
We must have scoured it out very quickly in probably a matter of hours or even days, no more than that, I don't think. So the falls whipped round this corner and re-established itself up where you can see the bridges, and then began cutting back to the present location of the falls.
The boiling waters of the whirlpool are the legacy of this dramatic moment in the falls' evolution. Below the Niagara Whirlpool, 4 miles downstream from where the falls are now, the gorge narrows once again. The river bends around a headland in the bottom of the gorge and is thrown with awesome power into a narrow funnel, this time creating Class 5 rapids. Perfect for the ultimate thrill seeker.
All right, time to take the throttle.
This jet-powered boat is one of the newest ways visitors can experience Niagara. It's constructed of aluminum and uses 3 500-horsepower jet engines to battle against the currents. Driving downstream with the flow of the river only adds to the ride. But next to these rapids, sitting on the headland, is Niagara Glen, a place quite unlike any other in the gorge. This haunting landscape seems a far cry from the noise and power of the river. Yet for Keith Tinkler, this place helps resolve the mystery of what's happening under the falls today. Gigantic boulders the size of houses are strewn about in chaotic fashion, and in them are strange holes big enough to stand up in. They appear to have been drilled into the earth as if the solid rock was as soft as wood. What caused them reveals that Niagara Glen was once subject to the same powerful forces as the falls are today. Called potholes, they are carved by gravel and stones, spun around by the swirling waters at the bed of the river.
Started probably in a shallow depression in the riverbed with water driving gravel in, and then driving the gravel down and drilling the hole over time down as far as my feet.
Although now the river flows to one side of the glen, the potholes prove that once this land was directly under the falls at some point in the past.
It's a really wonderful thing when you can reconstruct what the falls used to be like here, and to know that when you're walking on the paths, you're walking on the old river bottom. And to sort of look up through the trees, see the sky, and think of that as the water, and think of it as where the Maid of the Mist would be floating above you. I think it's amazing.
The question is, when were the falls here? Amazingly, fragments of snail and clam shells answered the question. Keith Tinkler has obtained radiocarbon dates from these shells he's dug up at several points along the glen.
The importance of finding the shells here at Niagara Glen, right through the glen, is that we've been able to use them to date accurately the location of the falls through time, and to know that they spent 5,000 years retreating through this glen.
Although the falls spent 5,000 years eroding through the glen, they began even further back in time and even farther away. The birthplace "7 miles from where they are today, this desolate place strewn with rocks and boulders is where the falls first began. At the end of the last ice age, there was no river here, but instead 2 ancient meltwater lakes and a low cliff now called the Niagara Escarpment. The escarpment stretches for about 700 miles. Above it used to be a glacial lake geologists named Tonawanda, and below it, lapping against the bottom of the cliff, was another called Lake Iroquois. The water flowed between these 2 lakes and fell over the cliff. This is what led to the birth of the falls.
What was happening was, although the upper Great Lakes waters and ice sheets were supplying just as much water as now, they were spilling over the escarpment in 5 different places from a lake called Lake Tonawanda upstream.
Through time, the land tilted, and all the water became concentrated in what was to become the Niagara River. At the time, the water fell only 35 feet, but as Lake Iroquois receded, the cliff got higher, and the falls drop heightened to 80 feet.
And that's when the falls began, because that would have been a really effective process, scouring the weak shales, undercutting the stronger units, and that's when the recession of the falls began.
Retracing their journey upriver means starting at the cliff 12,600 years ago, as the falls cut an incision into the hard Niagara Escarpment. Traveling at an average distance of 3 feet a year, they took 2,500 years to move the first 3 miles upriver. Then they hit Niagara Glen. Hard rock and lower volumes of water caused the falls to stall here. They took 5,000 years to move less than a mile. But when the falls reached the whirlpool, they turned a sharp 90 degrees and followed the line of softer sediment. In only a matter of hours, a section of the gorge 1 mile long was blasted away. But it took another 4,500 years before the falls cut back the last 2.5 miles to reach the position we see them in today. Erosion means that as it retreats upstream, the falls should eat back towards Lake Erie, where they will eventually disappear. But having spent the last 12,600 years grinding back the gorge, in only the last 100 years, industry and tourism has intervened, and the falls no longer do what nature intended, but what man desires. Eroding back at high speed, the falls are fast-track geology. But now that movement has been slowed down due to the overwhelming influence of man.
When the first white people saw Niagara Falls in the 17th century, it was a very frightening thing for them. One of the reasons is that all of the wild aspects of nature, mountains and the ocean and waterfalls, were terrifying because these were forces that people had to wrestle with for survival. But today, nature has been tamed. Niagara Falls has been contained.
By the end of the 19th century, North America had embraced the industrial age, and attitudes to Niagara's mighty waters had changed. From fearing them, they were now seen as a source of boundless energy. And entrepreneurs every bit as flamboyant and eccentric as the stuntmen and daredevils came to harness and exploit them. The most bizarre scheme was announced in 1894 by the famous razor blade magnate King Camp Gillette. He believed that there should be one gigantic city in the world, which he called Metropolis. And because it offered a power source that Gillette considered almost infinite, the site of this utopia would be Niagara Falls. He imagined this great future city would house 60 million people and would be the embodiment of perfection, morally as well as materially. Although Gillette's fanciful scheme was never built, it was just the start of ambitious plans to develop Niagara.
Well, Niagara Falls became industrialized partly because of where it was. By the end of the 19th Great Lakes. But here, right in the middle of it, was this potential power supply. And a lot of people could imagine that this could be a great industrial center if we could find a way of tapping it. And it just so happened that this was also the time when electricity was finally being figured out.
Images of Niagara's cascading cataracts had made Niagara Falls famous the world over. And drawn by a picture of the falls, one man came here to dramatically change them and the world we live in. His story began 4,600 miles away in Croatia, where Nikola Tesla grew up.
When Tesla was a really young boy, maybe around 8 years old or so, he happened to be sitting looking through a book with his uncle. And the book had etchings of different tourism sites and different natural wonders of the world. And when he leafed the page to an etching of Niagara Falls, he suddenly became very excited. He told his uncle, you know, one day when I'm older, I'm going to go to America and I'm going to harness the power of the falls.
When Tesla came to North America, electricity had already been invented using direct current. The problem was direct current couldn't be transmitted more than 100 yards. But at Niagara Falls in 1896, Tesla used the power of its water to create a new form of electricity, alternating current. This form of power meant that for the first time ever, electricity could be transmitted for hundreds of miles. Nestling among today's modern pylons at Niagara is all that remains of the first AC power plant in the world.
It was here, really, that our world, our modern-day world began. And when these power stations were constructed, a lot of care was put into it. It wasn't just a utilitarian structure. It was an artistic work.
This is Tesla's transformer house. It was from this building that the world's first alternating electric current was sent 22 miles to the city of Buffalo. Now reduced to storage space, this building was once a cathedral to industry.
The people who were developing power held power, electricity, in awe. It was a miraculous thing that could do things and transform things in ways that could never be done before. And Niagara Falls at that time, in general, is a very dynamic place. It was on the cutting edge of technology. People would, by people, I mean inventors, scientists, would flock from all over the world to come here just to visit the power station. Some would see the power station, not even bother to visit the falls.
Tesla's original power station has long been demolished, but sitting above the falls is the second plant built to his designs. The Rankin Power Station was completed in 1905 and to this day is still producing electricity the way Tesla had intended it to. For this to happen, water from the river must enter the power station before it goes over the falls. It then drops 150 feet and uses force and gravity to turn a huge wheel. That in turn spins magnets around a large copper coil, creating electricity. Tesla's power stations were the driving force behind Niagara's new industrial landscape. The abundance of cheap electricity sparked an industrial boom. Factories sprung up right along the fall's edge. Niagara was even renamed Manchester after the English industrial city.
Niagara Falls had been a very quiet tourism town. It was suddenly a dynamic industrial city that was known the world over. And the industry that resulted from alternating current, from Tesla's ideas, really changed the face of the globe. It changed our way of life.
The hydroelectric power generated by the falls meant that industry continued to grow into the 20th century, sometimes with dire consequences. Chemical spills and pollution. Today, Tesla, the man so responsible for shaping Niagara's industrial landscape, looks across the river to the Canadian side, home to an industry that shows no signs of decline.
My machine concludes that we need to talk.
We need more power for my abilities to work. More power!
Canada's side of the falls is home to one of the boom economies of the post-industrial age, tourism. At Clifton Hill, the place where Father Louis Hennepin first scrambled down the rocks to see the falls, things have changed. While the United States embraced heavy industry, Canada opened its door to tourism. The natural spectacle of the falls have attracted fun fairs and arcades since even before the days of the tightrope walkers. At the border crossing on Rainbow Bridge, Patrick McGreevy believes that these contrasting fates reflect the way Canada and the United States view the falls and themselves.
The U.S. and Canada are very similar countries in many ways, but here at Niagara Falls, they seem very different. The Canadian side seems manicured and embellished. It receives a lot of attention. The American side, in contrast, seems messy and neglected. It's almost as if it's the back door of the United States. Americans think of New York City as the entrance to their country, whereas for Canada, this really is the front door of Canada. And one reason for that is that this is the place where Canada established itself as an independent entity. Whereas for Americans, this is sort of a disturbing place because American identity has always been associated with a boundless frontier. And yet when Americans come to Niagara Falls, they're forced to look across this gorge and see another country. Therefore, they're forced to see the end of America.
The border is strictly policed, and often visitors to one side of the falls may not be permitted to enter the other. So experiencing them from either side can be difficult. But because the Canadian side has the classic view, it reaps the benefits of tourism, while America lags behind.
Well, we've been very fortunate because we have a frontal view of the falls, and geography has been very kind to us. So you kind of have to be on the Canadian side to look at the American falls.
The American falls are not only best seen from Canada, geology also means that they are less spectacular than the Canadian Horseshoe Falls. Instead of a deep, wide curve, the American falls are a straight cliff, and they're not as high as the Canadian side because of the huge pile of debris that lies at their base. Suffering from what might be seen as a slight inferiority complex, in 1969 a decision was made to shut off the American falls and remove the pile of giant boulders. A huge dam was constructed between Goat Island and the American shore, diverting all the water to the Horseshoe Falls. Geologists wanted to see how the rocks had eroded, but the hope was to restore the American falls to their full height. But not everyone was impressed.
When I saw the American Falls dry in 1969, to me it looked dead because the water is what makes it alive. It's what makes it Niagara Falls. Take away the water, there's nothing there but a rock ledge.
With the waters cut off, dawn broke on a brown and jagged cliff, scarred with cracks and fissures. At the bottom lay 300,000 tons of rubble. 2 broken corpses, a man and a woman, both thought to be suicides, lay in the mud, while millions of coins flung into the seething waters for good luck glittered in the sunlight. The team of engineers and geologists made detailed studies of the exposed cliff and rock strata. After 5 months, they concluded that the rock pile would have to stay. They discovered that the huge pile of rubble was actually holding up the crumbling cliff. There was no telling what would happen if they tried to remove it. No doubt disappointed, the waters were released and the American Falls were returned to their original state. Whether the economy of Niagara thrives on industry or tourism, both depend entirely on the fact that the falls are here. So for both Canada and the United States, controlling the falls' every move has become critical. In 1953, A treaty between both countries led to the construction of something that would limit the flow of the Niagara River. Every morning just before 8 a.m., the responsibility of controlling one of nature's most powerful wonders falls to just one man and the push of a button.
Yeah, this is River Control. We open gate number 3, please.
Jutting out from the shore for 1/3 of a mile is a control dam made up of 18 floodgates. Rather than damming the river completely, the gates control where and how much water flows across certain areas of the falls.
In the morning, the control dam is open to establish a minimum falls flow of 2832 cubic meters per second, and that's to provide ample flow for the tourists who come to enjoy the beauty and the scenic panorama of Niagara Falls.
Most tourists are blissfully unaware that during the day, only 50% of Niagara's waters actually go over the falls. But after dark, when the light shows and the fireworks are over, even less, a mere 25% goes over the edge. The rest of the water is diverted to massive power stations downriver. Vast volumes travel along man-made canals and tunnels 6 stories high and wide enough for 4 lanes of traffic. These waterways bypass the falls for 4 miles till they reach gigantic reservoirs. So big, they hold 22 billion gallons of Niagara water. Hewn into the solid walls of the Niagara Gorge is the Robert Moses Generating Plant. Completed in 1961, here man has created a falls of his own. Beneath this thick concrete exterior, the water drops 300 feet, almost twice as high as the falls themselves, enabling the plant to produce more than twice the amount of electricity than other power stations nearer the falls. This is Tesla's legacy. And as over 50% of Niagara's water is now diverted to power plants, the erosion that has taken place throughout the fall's life has been dramatically affected. Without vast volumes of water, the falls have much less power. Without power, they can't erode away the rock as quickly. And so for the time being, the falls can now only erode 1 foot every 10 years. The spectacle that people are so impressed by is in reality a fraction of the true power of the falls. Yet for some, the falls flowing at full capacity for just 1 day would be a dream come true.
There is a popular feeling that 1 day a year we should let the water flow full force over the falls so that people today can see what people 200 years ago could see. They could see Niagara flowing at its full capacity.
But until the consent of the power plants on both sides of the border is given, this remains a dream. The plan also threatens structures like boating docks and fishing piers that have been built along the river. These would be swept away as the river would rise 10 feet. And there are concerns about the erosive damage this would cause to the fragile edge of the falls, making Niagara carve back once again toward its own extinction, though this may take some time.
The falls will eventually recede back to Lake Erie, and that's approximately 20 miles from here. And it's estimated that 10,000 years from now, there will no longer be a falls to look at. So you can see it's a good thing we're looking at this today.
As grand as Niagara came and went without any human witnesses. So in geological terms, Our love affair with the falls has been as fleeting as it has been intense. And today, the future of this relationship rests firmly in our own hands.
See the South by rail, the mysterious bayous, swamps, and gulfs, the charm of Charleston, Savannah, and New Orleans. Don't miss American South by Rail, Wednesday night at 8 on Channel 8. Now, stay tuned for POV.
This program was made possible by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
This is PBS.
Every year, the Iditarod lures a special breed of men, women, and a special breed of dogs.
He'll take me through horrible windy conditions, and he'll be finding the trail and staying on it.
What sled dogs do is well beyond any human's ability.
They're just incredible.
Next time on Nature.
Sunday night at 8 on Channel 8.
Hi, I'm Chris Jussel for Antiques Roadshow. Tune in as we continue our visit to Tampa, Florida.
The fork is from the Hindenburg, the night that it exploded at Lakehurst, New Jersey.
That's Antiques Roadshow, only on PBS. Don't miss it.
Friday night at 9 on Channel 8. For outstanding achievement in television programming, the Emmy goes to Wild Arizona. Channel 8 is proud to accept this award on behalf of our viewers, because your support makes our achievements possible.
PBS is the laboratory of ideas. It's the laboratory of my imagination and expands my soul, my heart, my mind. PBS is part of my family. I want public television to bring to my children and grandchildren the things that I treasure. And if I can help those children open their eyes and see the possibilities, value education, value truth, I've done more than I ever dreamed. I think I've made myself just a teeny weeny bit immortal by giving this gift. It's really a wonderful feeling.
Britain is under siege.
I went from being an immature, rather scared young boy to being a fully grown and very competent fighter pilot.
Hitler unleashes a brutal force.
If we'd have run away, we'd have been cowards.
But the country refuses to give in.
There was this defiance. I'm not going to give in to Hitler.
Don't miss the dramatic conclusion of Finest Hour.
Monday night at 9 on Channel 8.
They were the mightiest ships of their time, indestructible and invincible. Yet one by one, the inconceivable happened, and the dark floor.
So many people's dreams ended here.
These are the stories of the great liners stars and the dreams that followed them to their watery graves.
I can still sit here now and see that liner just sliding beneath the waves.
Dive into the past to uncover lost liners.
Wednesday night at 9 on Channel 8.
4 writers shed their fears on a voyage of self-discovery.
Take me to the river. Dip me in the water.
New from Channel 8's Arizona collection.
POV, America's interactive showcase for independent points of view.
Next on POV, 2 men. One had a camera, one had a gun. Who shot first? A filmmaker looks at the violence in her own backyard.